Yeah.
Okay. So, first of all, you talked about introducing GIRFIC, and I suppose one of the strong things that we're invited to do within our multi-agency team is to not talk about GIRFIC, but talk about getting it right for every child, because that's what the acronym refers to. But we live in a world of kind of shortened forms and abbreviations and not enough time, and so actually taking the time to say each time, this is about getting it right for children and young people. And so when we're doing our work about implementing getting it right, we do try to make a point of sticking to that, because it's about keeping the meaning attached to the work that we're doing, rather than indulging in the kind of abbreviations that can impact on us in orderly ways, So keeping it meaningful. And I think we had a wonderful example there from Karen about what it is to engage in an integrated set of services. And that's integration from the point of view of the theories coming into practice, but also in the everyday practice of children and babies who can intermingle, and where the whole thing is child-led. And getting it right for the child is about child-led practice. It's about keeping the child at the centre, and it's about developing a service provision which works across boundaries, really. So getting it right for every child is the work that I do. I'm the implementation officer for the voluntary sector, and I work within a multi-agency team which covers the NHS, children and families, social work, and the police, the criminal justice system. So it's about strategic planning for services to work more closely in an interactive, interwoven kind of way, rather than the kind of silo provision of services which is currently being the model. So then child at the centre, and then looking at what the universal service provision is for that child, and tending to the child's needs in that kind of way, by looking at what's working well. It's again, as Karen was saying, it's about a strengths-based approach to helping children to develop. And then bringing in services in an early, the parenting strategy will talk a lot about early intervention. And that's about bringing supports for the child or young person in an early way, and that can be early in early years. And so there's increasing recognition of the huge impact of the early years on the rest of one's life, So early in years, but also early in the life of a crisis, so that it's about not waiting until things build up into a crisis kind of state before we intervene, but it's about looking after the early years of the child and looking after things when things change, and being tuned into that. And so that by having a more integrated set of services with keeping the child at the centre, we're more likely to be tuned into what does this child need, and what does this child need now, and for how long. So it's very solution focused and strengths-based approach. And I'm not sure how long you want me to talk about it now. It could be that that's an introduction, but it is about integrated services, and it is about us all the stakeholders, which is why I'm particularly pleased to be here today, because the stakeholders that we've been focusing on over the last few years, because Getting It Right has been going for a number of years now, and is being implemented across Scotland in all 32 local authorities, and we're each in a different kind of state of readiness in terms of full implementation. But in Edinburgh we're actually quite far advanced with that, and so we're now feeling that actually all the professional stakeholders should know about getting it right, and will have engaged in some level of training. But of course when we look at who are the stakeholders in terms of children and young people, there's the children and young people themselves, so what do they know about getting it right? But also the parents and carers, and how do we engage with parents and carers as key stakeholders in supports for children and young people. And so part of what I've been doing over the last few months is looking at piloting some work to engage with parents and carers, to share that language of getting it right, which is built around 8 key wellbeing indicators. And they're sometimes called the Shidari indicators, but that's just another acronym. It's really about 8 aspects of well-being for children, which are safe, healthy, active, respected, responsible, nurtured, achieving, included. And our feeling is that if all of these things are in place, then the child's needs are being looked after. And also, I think it's some of you might know something about the current Children's Bill, which is going through the Scottish Parliament, and that's very focused on the rights of children and young people, and it relates and discusses the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is about 21 years old in itself, and has grown up and across Europe and has been incorporated into lots of legal frameworks. So So we're now looking in Scotland at, well, you know, where does the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child sit with us in Scotland, and to what extent are we going to incorporate that into Scottish law and our service provision? So what I would say is that if we're doing getting it right for every child, and if we're attending to the 8 wellbeing, you know, indicators that have been identified, we are doing children's rights. And so it's a children's rights approach to development, as well as a child-centred approach. And I think that's very key. So for me, I've always been a kind of multi-agency kind of movement where boundaries don't sit comfortable with me. So I'm very pleased to be part of the team leading this work. But also I am very keen that we thoroughly engage from the rights point of view and the rights of parents to engage in this also. That it's not about keeping the knowledge with the, you know, the so-called experts. It's about sharing the knowledge and sharing the language, because I think the language of how we are with our children is so key and so important. And when we have vulnerabilities around our children and what's happening perhaps with them in school, it's about accessing a shared language so that we can then go and feel empowered to go to the teacher and say, well, actually that child's not included. You know, the child doesn't feel respected, or these behaviours you know, disallow a certain, you know, aspect of inclusion or achieving or whatever. So I think by sharing the language, we then have a language of engagement that that will take us all forward in a good direction, whether we're, you know, child, infant, young person, or parent, in fact. So that's probably enough for me to introduce that. And I have got some materials here which I would encourage you to look at and take away, and just any questions at any point during our morning. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the film as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Marilyn. And I suppose